It's great to welcome back to the show today Bill Scher, senior writer at Campaign for America's Future, contributing editor at Politico. Bill, last time you were on, I believe it was, I don't know, a month and a half or 2 months ago, I suggested that I was finding this election to be the most unusual and compelling in a very, very long time. And at the time you said, well, I'm still finding 2008 more compelling. Are you now ready to say that this has gone above and beyond and has become a very, very bizarre and unusual election?
Well, this is the bigger train wreck, of course, but and I mean, Donald Trump has an obsession with being in the news, regardless of whether it makes sense politically or not. So it always makes it more entertaining and shocking. But we may be coming up to a point where the outcome is known, and we're going to be lacking a lot of drama for the fall campaign, which we're not accustomed to. We're in the last couple of times, even when Obama was ahead of McCain by a decent amount, there was this lingering fear that there was a secret white vote that would materialize that would not accept an African American president. That proved not to be true. Whereas now, if the polls are 6 to 10 points for Clinton nationally, there's no secret vote that's going to overcome that on election day.
Yeah, there's been a lot of reaction to when I don't do polling. I know that that might not be a surprise to you, but seemingly our audience thinks that when I talk about a poll, I've in some way done the poll and am presenting the numbers I want. I've been just reporting that, 16 of the last 16 national polls have Hillary Clinton ahead, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the reaction is that for some reason, the polls right now cannot be trusted, either due to oversampling of Democrats, which has been sort of explained by 538 pretty precisely as to why that's not a fair critique of many of these polls, or because they're not yet considering something, as you're talking about, some X factor that is not yet built in there. Historically speaking, mid-August, do polls start to paint a relatively precise picture of where the race really is? More people are interested, a higher share of those who will vote are now paying attention?
Mid-August is maybe a touch early to draw too precise a conclusion. Now we're past both conventions. There are some years where the conventions happen later than mid-August, or they're happening around mid-August. I just did a piece for Real Clear Politics talking about Trump's theoretical ceiling. You go back 12 months with Donald Trump, and he has been between 38 and 44% in the Real Clear Politics average. And that's different than the Republican primary, where people talked about a Trump ceiling very arbitrarily, and they weren't paying attention to the fact that in the average, his number was going up, 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 up the whole time. He led the Real Clear Politics average the entire time. Not the case versus Hillary. So at minimum, you have to say, what Trump has been doing to this point is not working. Now, there are examples where people pick up steam in the fall. Gerald Ford did, Mitt Romney did, Al Gore did, but something changed. Something changed in the dynamic of the race for that to occur. Maybe Donald Trump does a Mitt Romney etch-a-sketch and runs a completely different character beginning from the first debate. If that happened, maybe those numbers would change. I am not expecting that. And even if he did try it, it's possible that his perception on the American electorate has been so seared in that it's too late to do a real change.
There have been some reacting to news of former and current Republicans saying not only will they not be voting for Donald Trump in November, some saying that they will be voting for Hillary Clinton in November. The reaction has sort of been along two camps. There are those who email me and say that's because of the unique disaster that is Donald Trump. There are others who say that's because Hillary Clinton is such a moderate Democrat that politically it makes sense that she would appeal to many Republicans, many more Republicans than the normal average Democrat would sort of appeal to. I'd love to get your thoughts on that, number one. But number two, my analysis has been, effectively speaking, for the Republican Party's future, it doesn't matter that when you have this number of public Republicans saying they're voting for the Democrat, whatever the reason is, because it's anti-Trump or because Hillary's appealing, it's got to be bad for the Republican Party's future, no?
Well, yes, and to your initial premise, those two things, is it Trump's failings or Clinton's moderation? I mean, those things are mutually exclusive. I think both factors are at play here. The bigger question for the Republicans going forward is, assuming Trump loses, which all signs point to, and potentially by a lot, is it because of Trump the person or the Trump platform? There was the RNC autopsy after Mitt Romney lost. Mitt Romney ran on self-deportation of immigrants and was caught talking about the 47% freeloading off of the American government. That stuff clearly did not play well, and so there's this formal Republican National Committee autopsy said we have to reach out to minority voters in a more robust way. We have to figure out how to do comprehensive immigration reform. We can't get caught up about voting laws that encourage early voting. We need to get into the early voting game and try to win those voters to our side. The Donald Trump nomination runs in the exact opposite direction of all of that. So you could then conclude, okay, it's been 3 times now, Obama twice and now Hillary. The problem is not them. The problem is us. We need to really do something dramatically different with non-white voters if we're going to function as a major party in modern America. Or, and so that's kind of like a Jeb Bush, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio type of interpretation. The other interpretation, which is more favorable to Ted Cruz, is, hey, we can still be anti-immigrant, but you can't insult Gold Star mothers while being anti-immigrant. So let's not abandon our anti-immigrant position. We can still win as a predominantly all-white party if we just need to have the right candidate for it. I think that's the debate that Republicans are going to have come November 9th.
CNN has done a couple of libertarian town halls. I believe they're going to be doing a Green Party town hall. We now have this independent Republican Mormon who is running an independent campaign, like I said. To what extent are there, let me phrase it a different way. Are there any states in which, in the big picture, any of these third-party candidacies could impact election results?
Not as it stands. There is, you look at the last couple of times where third-party candidates played a role. And I'm sorry to get your YouTube comments in a lather, but Ralph Nader did contribute to tipping the election to George W. Bush. Yes, the Supreme Court had played a major role in that also, but he had enough votes to tip New Hampshire to Bush and tip Florida to the Supreme Court. And some people look at 1992, Ross Perot. It's a myth that he tipped the whole election to Clinton. There is evidence that he tipped Georgia, Ohio, and I want to say New Hampshire. Forgive me if I'm getting the third one wrong. But they tipped those to Clinton, but those 3 in and of itself were not the Electoral College margin. So you can't say that Perot played that much of a role. In the national exit polls, Perot drew evenly from Clinton and Bush when people asked, what's your second choice? In those races, in the Ross Perot race, Perot had a big number. He was seen as a plausible candidate by some. In 2000, Nader had a very small number. Just the race was so tight that he was able to make a difference. Typically speaking, the bigger the lead, and in Clinton's case, Clinton was seen as well ahead of Bush in 92. The bigger the lead, the less of a fear that people inclined to vote third party have to casting that vote. They don't feel that they're going to be a spoiler, so they can safely cast the protest vote. So you may see this year, if Clinton is well ahead of Trump, people might say, I feel comfortable voting for Jill Stein, especially if I'm in a deep blue or deep red state. I feel comfortable voting for Gary Johnson. Trump's a sure loser anyway, and I don't want that guy to win. So I don't mind voting for Gary Johnson. So those numbers may come up because of those factors. The counter prevailing force against that happening is they don't have a lot of money, either one of them. And they're probably not going to get into the debates. Neither one is getting close to 15% right now. And Gary Johnson's kind of close, but I mean, he's more like 8, 9, 10. That's a pretty big jump to make between now and mid-September if he's going to do that. So probably they're not going to get the face time. Probably they're not going to have the money. The one underlying question is it such a blowout that people say, I don't need to have an ad about Jill Stein or Gary Johnson to make me do that vote. I'm just going to do it anyway.
Last thing I want to touch on, and it sort of is related to what you're saying here. I am having a little bit of concern that if the polls do stay significantly, moderately in favor of Hillary Clinton, that there may be Clinton voters or would-be Clinton voters who would say, you know, she doesn't need my vote. I'm going to stay home because she appears to be so far ahead. Is that a reasonable concern?
I wouldn't say it's a huge concern. There was some of that in '96 where the polls for Clinton and Dole were pretty big, and I think the margin ended up being a little smaller because there was that level of complacency. The big risk here for Democrats is if you have this big margin against Trump, and if you get then a sizable vote for Jill Stein because of that, it's not going to tip the election to Trump, but it could fortify the Green Party's position in American politics. If they break 5% nationally, they get a lot of money from the federal government for 2020. Their estimation is about $10 million. It depends exactly how much the vote is. That determines how much they would get. It would also probably help them on a state-by-state basis to become ballot qualified and not have to do a petition procedure to get on the ballot next time around in several states. So if you want the Green Party to have that kind of foothold, then it makes sense to vote Green Party and not worry whether it's going to be a spoiler for Trump. If you don't want that to happen, if you think it's sort of a casual symbolic vote, you might want to ask yourself, wait a second, do I want to have the Greens in the Democrats' face for the next 4 to 8 years? That might make things a bit touchy going forward. So people should treat that vote as a serious vote and think about what do you really want to have happen after November 8th.
All right, Bill Scher, Campaign for America's Future, Politico. He's watching it. We're watching it. Thanks as always, Bill.
My pleasure.